The Tree of Liberty was one of the earliest and most significant symbols of American resistance to British tyranny, dating back to pre revolutionary demonstrations. The Liberty Tree in Boston was a large elm near Boston Common where patriots, including the Sons of Liberty, gathered beginning in 1765 to protest the Stamp Act. The Patriots hung effigies of tax collectors and held public rallies beneath its branches, declaring it the Tree of Liberty. It became a sacred site for colonial unity and freedom. When British troops eventually cut it down in 1775, Patriots responded by planting new liberty trees in other colonies. The tree thus became a living emblem of resistance, representing growth, endurance, and the natural rights granted by God, not kings. Thomas Jefferson later echoed the imagery in his famous 1787 letter, writing, "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants." For the colonists, the tree represented a moral cause of liberty rooted in divine justice. Greetings, patriots. I'm Greene. Welcome to God in America, where we stand to protect our faith and freedom. The era of independence was bursting with symbols. The Tree of Liberty spoke of vigilant boldness. A tree also adorned our first flag. It wasn't the Massachusetts elm tree, it was the New Hampshire pine, but the symbolism was the same. In essence, the Tree of Liberty represented the people's moral stand for freedom. The pine tree flag represented that same moral appeal to heaven as the ultimate judge of justice. Both grew from the same spiritual soil, a belief that liberty was not man-made but rooted in the Creator's law. A 1722 British law prohibited New Hampshire settlers from cutting down any white pine trees more than 1 foot in diameter. Those trees, the law declared, belonged to the king for potential use in naval construction. For decades, the law was rarely enforced, but after John Wentworth was appointed royal governor of the colony, he decided to crack down on violations. In April 1772, royal authorities arrested the sawmill owner Ebenezer Mudgett of Weir, New Hampshire, and charged him with breaking the law. New Englanders had long resented the so-called pine mast laws as infringements on their livelihoods and liberties. The night of his arrest, after being released on bail, Mudgett and about 20 other townsmen disguised themselves and broke into a room in the local inn where the sheriff and his deputy were staying. The sawmill owner and his colleagues seized the two men, beat them, then ran them out of town before a jeering crowd of onlookers. Mudgett and 8 others were later arrested and charged with rioting and assault. A sympathetic judge gave them nominal fines as their punishment. In the aftermath of the affair, the pine tree became a symbol of resistance to royal authority, and the so-called Pine Tree Riot may have inspired the Boston Tea Party. During the Battle of Bunker Hill, New England colonial troops flew pine tree flags. These were red battle flags with a pine tree on the upper left. In October of 1775, George Washington commissioned a pine tree flag for the American Navy. The general's design was a pine tree on a white field above which appeared the words, "An appeal to heaven." The phrase, frequently used by the revolutionaries, appeared in John Locke's second treatise of government. He wrote, "For whenever violence is used and injury done, though by the hands appointed to administer justice, war is made upon the sufferers, who, having no appeal on earth to right them, they are left to the only remedy in such cases, an appeal to heaven." In other words, when there's no just temporal authority to whom the oppressed can appeal, their final option is to take up arms and appeal to heaven. We can see this imagery in Scripture as well. Psalm 1 verse 3 describes the righteous man as a tree planted by streams of water, rooted and fruitful. Jeremiah 17 verses 7 and 8 emphasizes the person who trusts in the Lord is like a tree that is unafraid of adverse weather. Liberty rooted in righteousness is enduring. Liberty apart from God withers. The early patriots believed they were the kind of tree that stood firm against oppression, nourished by faith and conscience. On June the 14th, as we honor the symbolism of our flag, let's remember our original banner. The Tree of Liberty still calls us to vigilance. Freedom requires deep roots in God's truth. Without that, the leaves of liberty dry up and tyranny will recapture America. Our appeal must still be to heaven and the righteous judge who blesses nations that honor him, according to Psalm 33, verse 12. If we're to keep the fruit of freedom, we must keep its roots nourished in truth, faith, and courage. Well, thanks for being with us today. Until next time, let's keep the light of vigilantly depending on God burning.